There is something deeply unsettling about the idea of an animal arriving somewhere it was never supposed to be, and then thriving, not just surviving in the margins, but genuinely taking over, outcompeting animals that spent millions of years evolving for that exact environment, dismantling food webs that took just as long to develop, and doing it all within the span of a few human generations. This is the reality of invasive species, and while most people picture something small and overlooked when they hear that term, a fish, a rodent, a creeping vine, the truth is that some of the most damaging invaders on this planet are enormous. In today's video, I want to rank each of the 7 continents by the single largest invasive species that currently calls it home. It shouldn't come as much of a surprise that Antarctica sits in last place. The continent is, by almost every measure, one of the most hostile places on Earth for any organism trying to establish itself. Temperatures plummet to extremes that would kill most animals outright. There is very little plant life to sustain herbivores, and for any predator hoping to find prey, the options are extraordinarily limited. Penguins, seals, krill, and fish. That's essentially the Antarctic menu, and it's only accessible to animals with very specific biological adaptations. The islands surrounding the continent are a somewhat different story. The South Georgia Islands became infamous for their invasive rat problem, which devastated native seabird populations for decades. After one of the most ambitious rodent eradication projects ever attempted, South Georgia was finally declared rat-free in 2018, and native bird populations have been recovering ever since. On the mainland itself, the only confirmed invasive species are small insects. Antarctica takes 7th place, and on a list like this, coming last is genuinely a good thing. Moving north to Africa, we find a continent that has, for the most part, resisted large-scale invasions by megafauna. That's not a coincidence. Africa's ecosystems are ancient, brutally competitive, and filled with apex predators and highly specialized animals that have been co-evolving for millions of years. If you're a non-native species hoping to carve out territory here, you're stepping into one of the toughest arenas on the planet. That said, one European animal has managed to establish itself across parts of southern Africa: the fallow deer. Native to Eurasia, fallow deer were introduced into South Africa in the early 1800s, primarily by British colonists who wanted to hunt familiar animals in an unfamiliar land. I've always found that to be a strange impulse, traveling to one of the most biodiverse places on Earth and then importing the wildlife you left behind. But it was remarkably common practice among colonial settlers. Over the following 2 centuries, fallow deer spread through several regions and have since competed with native grazing species and browsed vegetation that those species depend on. The largest bucks can reach weights of up to 150 kilograms, which makes the fallow deer Africa's largest invasive land mammal, and that puts Africa in 6th place. Asia presents a fascinating challenge for this kind of ranking. It's the largest continent on Earth, and yet large non-native invaders are less common than you might expect. On the Asian mainland, most ecosystems are patrolled by powerful native predators: brown bears, tigers, wolves, leopards, which makes life extremely difficult for any would-be invader. The continent's island ecosystems are more vulnerable, and Japan, in particular, has struggled with North American species. But the largest invasive animal in Asia is not found on any island, and it is not a land animal at all. It's the arapaima, one of the largest freshwater fish in the world, native to the Amazon and Essequibo river basins of South America. The arapaima is a genuinely ancient creature. Fossils of the genus have been found dating back approximately 23 million years, and what makes them so remarkable is how little they've needed to change since then. They can breathe atmospheric oxygen directly, surfacing regularly to gulp air, which means they can survive and hunt in warm, oxygen-poor waters where most other fish would perish. They are also armored with tough, layered scales that are highly resistant to the bites of piranha. Several Asian countries imported arapaima for aquaculture purposes, and during flooding events, which are common across tropical Asia, these fish escaped into river systems whose native fish had no evolutionary experience dealing with such an efficient predator. The arapaima can reach weights of up to around 200 kilograms, and that puts Asia in 5th place. Europe's entry on this list tells one of the more extraordinary population stories in modern wildlife history. In the early 20th century, a small number of white-tailed deer, native to North America, were introduced into Finland. The early years of that population were genuinely precarious. At one point, the entire wild population in the country consisted of just 6 individuals, and yet, somehow, against considerable odds, those deer survived, reproduced, and multiplied. By 2021, their population had exceeded 100,000 animals. That trajectory is remarkable, and it's well documented. Today, white-tailed deer are considered an invasive species in Finland, competing with native ungulates and damaging forest vegetation. Hunting is used as a population management tool, but they remain firmly established. The largest northern bucks can reach weights of around 180 kilograms, and on rare occasions, the heaviest individuals on record have exceeded 200 kilograms. Either way, they are the largest invasive invasive animal in Europe, and that puts the continent in fourth place. North America is home to some of the most well-known invasive species stories in the world. Florida alone hosts a remarkable variety of non-native reptiles, Burmese pythons, monitor lizards, and a handful of other species that escaped or were released from the exotic pet trade. But the largest invasive animal in North America is not a python, and it is not a wild boar. Even though feral pigs cause enormous agricultural and ecological damage across much of the continent, the title belongs to the gemsbok, a large antelope native to the arid savannas and deserts of southern Africa. In 1969, the New Mexico State Department of Game and Fish introduced the first of 93 gemsbok to the Tularosa Basin, releasing animals over the following years as part of a hunting program. Today, the population is estimated at several thousand individuals, having at one point peaked at around 6,000 before managed hunting brought numbers down somewhat. The gemsbok's success in New Mexico comes down to the same qualities that make it formidable in the Kalahari. It is superbly adapted to arid environments, capable of regulating its body temperature in extreme heat, and able to extract moisture from desert plants. In New Mexico, it faces almost none of the predators it would encounter in Africa. Cougars will occasionally prey on young animals, but gemsbok are accustomed to defending themselves against lions, leopards, and hyenas. The result is an animal that routinely outcompetes native desert species like pronghorn and bighorn sheep for limited forage. Male gemsbok can reach maximum weights of around 240 kilograms, and that puts North America in third place. Australia and the broader Oceania region represent perhaps the most sobering case study in this entire video. These are ecosystems isolated from the rest of the world for tens of millions of years, producing animals found nowhere else on the planet. And then, over just a few centuries, humans arrived and began introducing species with little understanding of the consequences. Australia's water buffalo is technically the largest feral non-native animal on the continent, with an estimated population of around 200,000 animals as of 2022. But since the species introduced is a domesticated form, it doesn't qualify under our rules. That brings us to the dromedary camel. Camels were introduced into Australia in the 19th century by the British, brought over to serve as working animals capable of crossing the continent's vast, waterless interior, and they were extraordinarily well suited to the task. When motorized transport eventually replaced them, many were simply released into the outback. With no natural predators and a landscape closely resembling their ancestral Middle Eastern habitat, the population grew dramatically. By 2008, estimates placed the number of feral dromedaries in Australia at over 1 million. Their impact on native vegetation, water holes, and soil stability has been significant. A dromedary can reach a maximum weight of around 600 kilograms, and that puts Oceania in second place. And then there is South America. In the 1980s, Colombian drug lord Pablo Escobar imported 4 hippos to his private estate, part of a personal zoo that also included giraffes, elephants, and various exotic species. After he died in 1993, the hippos were the only animals left behind. Too large and too dangerous to relocate, they made their way into the Magdalena River Basin and began to breed. By 2007, estimates put the population at around 16 individuals. Today, that figure is thought to be approximately 200 animals, though counting hippos in dense riparian vegetation is genuinely difficult work. There is no native predator in South America capable of killing a healthy adult hippo. None. They are altering river chemistry, competing with native species for habitat, and they have been responsible for multiple attacks on local people. Attempts to manage the population through culling and chemical sterilization have so far failed to meaningfully reduce their numbers. A large bull hippopotamus can reach a maximum weight of approximately 3,200 kilograms, more than 5 times the weight of the dromedary camel. South America takes the top spot, and it isn't close. So there it is, the largest invasive species on every continent, ranging from small insects barely clinging on in Antarctica, all the way to a growing population of multi-ton hippos slowly expanding through a South American river system. The one thread connecting almost every story in this video is a deliberate human decision, made for sport, for agriculture, for nostalgia, or in one extraordinary case, for the personal indulgence of a drug lord. It makes you wonder what the ecosystems of the next century will look like if we don't become significantly better at thinking through the consequences before we act. Which of these animals surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments. And if you think there's a strong candidate I've missed for any of the continents, drop it below. There's always more to this topic than any single video can cover.